Hi, everyone, and welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Therese McMillan, Executive Director of the San Francisco Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Executive Director of the Association of Bay Area Governments, positions she assumed in 2019. Before that, Therese worked at the MTC for 25 years before serving in the Obama administration as the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Transit Administration for 6.5 years, and the Chief Planning Officer for the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Metro, for 3 years. Therese, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
It's great to be here with you all.
Well, today, a big shout out to everyone who is involved in our next 3 in-person meetings, all associated with our Maintenance and Roadway Operations Workshop in Cleveland. On June 25th, we have the 2023 Conference Planning Meeting. This is where our members come together to brainstorm topics and themes for all the meetings that will be held in 2023. On June 26th, we have the IBTTA Foundation Service Project supporting the Boys and Girls Clubs of Northeast Ohio. We will be laying out a basketball court with VersaCourt outdoor court tiles. We've seen some interesting pictures of how those tiles are put together. And then the Piece de Résistance, June 27 through 28, is the Maintenance, Engineering, and Roadway Operations Workshop. It's a phenomenal program led by our chief meeting organizer, Chris Mata, the chief engineer of the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, with a great group of planners and hosted by the Ohio Turnpike. The subjects are on target and range from the impact of extreme weather on our roadways, to attracting and retaining talent, to the future of roadway engineering, to managing and reusing assets, and everything in between. So please join us in Cleveland for all 3 events. Well, this is Café IBTTA, where we drink coffee or your other favorite beverage and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And we are taking your questions. We want to get started right away. Therese is a native of California and has worked most of her professional life in the San Francisco Bay Area. So in the chat, please type a word or phrase expressing your thoughts or feelings about San Francisco. Tell us what you think. All right. Wow. Go Clipper. Yeah. Sourdough. Love it. Chilly and foggy. Cold and windy. Golden Gate Bridge. Not one of your properties, Therese, but still a wonderful landmark.
Yes, indeed. A partner. Very, very close partner.
Yeah. Bears. Expensive. Greatest food
Warriors. There
of
you
North
go.
Warriors. Yeah. What's the series now? 3-2? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Museums. Mesmerizing. Wow. People have a lot of really interesting and fun things to say about San Francisco.
Great.
Well, Therese, we'll talk more about San Francisco a little later on, but in the meantime, let's talk about you. You have had a very amazing transportation career so far. Would you tell us a little bit about the journey that you've taken to get into transportation and regional planning?
Well, one of the things that's really interesting, if we want to go way back, I thought at first I was going to be a veterinarian. That was what I was set out to do. Yes, indeed. And went to UCLA for a couple of years and transferred to UC Davis to pursue that track. And then as maybe the experience of several people going into the healthcare related or, medical related industries, I took organic chemistry and decided I don't like dogs and cats that much. So I pivoted and ended up in a newly emerging major at UC Davis called Environmental Policy Analysis and Planning. And had the opportunity to do an internship with the California Transportation Commission in Sacramento.
Wow.
And that pretty much launched me into my career. And then I went on to UC Berkeley for my graduate work in city and regional planning, and was one of the, if not, I think the first official graduate of a combined master's program with the engineering department, civil engineering, in transportation. So that was my kickstart. Yeah.
So we have organic chemistry to thank for your being here today.
Yes, you do.
Right?
Indeed, you do.
It's fun and interesting to see all the twists and turns we take in our careers, and how certain courses change our attitude and our disposition.
Yeah, for sure.
Therese, you're the executive director of both the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Bay Area Toll Authority. Tell us a little bit about the scale and the scope of your operations.
Yeah, well, actually, it's even more complex than that. As you had mentioned in your introduction, I'm the executive director of 2 regional bodies, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and all of the hats that it wears, one of which is BATA, the Bay Area Toll Authority. So same body of people, but we're different, actually have different statutory authorities that they oversee. So there's a whole transportation portfolio, dominated by MTC and BATA. With ABAG, they're our land use planning agency sister. And so, until probably 2017, there had been distinctly separate entities, but through a complex, we don't have time for the complex history that led up to that. But in essence, while the boards themselves did not merge, they merged the staffs and had one executive director over both of them to serve the portfolios of both.
Right.
And that is what I do there. Most recently, though, kind of in that space, legislation established us as the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority.
Wow.
Yes, back in 2019. So adding to our list of hats, we have, I oversee a really significant and big array of issues. But historically, transportation really has been the driver and at the center of it. And in that space, we do everything. We in terms of planning for transportation, funding and finance of transportation, coordination among various folks that deliver transportation. So we're not a transit agency like BART or Muni or Golden Gate Transit. But of the 27 folks that do that, we have a required role to coordinate them.
Right.
And so that's in large part why we were established in the first place back in the 70s. We have a very huge role in helping to administer federal and state regulation of all sorts as it applies, and regional as it applies to transportation. As you might imagine, that's a significant role. And we do operations. Clipper, as was noted by some of our audience members, and Fast Track, which is, of course, you all know all about that, are 2 major enterprises where we actually are the operator. With the bridges, Caltrans, as you know, is the owner operator, but we have a significant role. We control all the revenue as the Bay Area Toll Authority. And so work hand in glove with Caltrans in overseeing particularly the management of the assets of that massive capital portfolio that's related to BATA. So there's a lot. There's a lot that we do in the transportation space.
There is a lot. And Therese, this makes me think about one of the things we talked about in terms of the mega region, that MTC is one of 3 major partners in the mega region out there. And I had the privilege of observing one of your mega region meetings and actually speaking to the Megaregion group. Tell us a little bit about, this larger entity in the mega region and how it works.
Yeah. And this actually very much gets back to the complex ecosystem that is a transportation land use relationship in the San Francisco Bay Area, which, as you know, as I'm sure your folks know, is composed of 9 counties, right, all of which have physically some part that touch the bay.
Yeah.
So that's Alameda, Santa Clara, San Mateo, San Francisco, Marin, Sonoma, Napa, Solano, and Contra Costa. But their external borders are not, there's not a wall on those borders. And in terms of particularly the economic activity that happens, what we have seen is that housing in particular, we have a lot of people that live outside of that normal border, but commute into the jobs that exist in the San Francisco Bay Area. That has been a phenomenon for a long time, right, but has increased in that, we've seen a big increase. And when we talk about the mega region, I would just say it's a part of the mega region. It's the northern part that is the one that borders the Sacramento region, and then the San Joaquin, sort of a gateway into the Central Valley region. There's a whole nother dynamic that happens to the south, as you might imagine, down in Santa Clara with Monterey and San Benito and the like. But the mega region coalition, if you will, that was established was really focused on that piece of the dynamic. And the movement of freight is a big issue as well. The Port of Oakland is a significant West Coast trade center, but a lot of the activity that happens going into the port in terms of exports going out as well as moving imports goes up through Sacramento and certainly through the Central Valley. So recognizing all of that and the fact that if we plan blind to those interactions, we're not doing our job.
Right.
And so the coordination of our long range planning was a primary driver for pulling together. This is voluntary. It's basically the coordination of the regional agencies, MTC, SACOG, and the San Joaquin COG, to voluntarily work together to better coordinate our plan. Affect and support, travel and mobility between regions.
Therese, that's fascinating. And it everybody talks about silos and how the silos prevent that kind of cooperation and collaboration. And I've just really admired the collaboration that I saw among the very small number of people that I was able to see in your recent mega region meeting. Let's talk a little bit about your service in the Obama administration. You gave an interview a few years ago with the California Transit Association. You said, "I have had no greater career honor than to be selected to a political appointment by the first African-American president of the United States. Looking back, the entire experience was an example of nothing planned, but that unexpected moment of seeing a door open and taking the risk to walk through. There was a lot of personal sacrifice to that decision. However, I would do it again in a heartbeat." Tell us more, elaborate on that.
Wow, so much, so much to say. My perspective of that being the highlight of career, that has not changed. It truly was extraordinary on a professional and personal level. I mentioned the sacrifice. I was in California. The first 2 years, I commuted back and forth every other weekend between DC and the Bay Area. Right. Because my youngest daughter had 2 more years of high school. She really didn't just wanted to disrupt that particular thing. There's all kinds of things you could say about that, but we went along with it. So that was tough. That was a really, really hard bit. But the incredible camaraderie that was attached to the USDOT and the political appointee family that was there was incredibly supportive. The work was extraordinary. I worked for the Federal Transit Administration. I was a deputy executive director, deputy administrator for, as you mentioned, actually it was the first sort of 4 years, because then I became the acting administrator and ran the agency for the last 2. And just to highlight some of the extraordinary opportunities and challenges, I'll mention 3. One was, if you remember, Hurricane Sandy. That was an incredible experience where I got to see the USDOT and all of its different, we spoke about silos and this sense, everyone works on these rigid little federal things, federal, alignments. But when there was an emergency affecting the entire, Northeast, and for the Federal Transit Administration, the largest transit agency in the country, having a third of its system underwater.
Yeah.
We had to move, we had to work fast. And, there were, 7 a.m. meetings, with the deputy secretary organizing an emergency response. It was an incredible experience. And to really be in the middle of that and to contribute to the recovery, the immediate response, and then the long recovery afterwards was really extraordinary. Kind of in a similar vein, we had pursued, my boss, Peter Rogoff, the administrator at the beginning of the Obama administration, had helped to aggressively pursue new safety regulatory authority for FTA. And that was fantastic. And then when I happened to be the acting administrator, the WMATA experienced a major fire at the LaFont station. I'm not sure if anyone in Washington.
The Washington Metro, right?
Yep.
Washington, D.C. Metro.
And I basically had to stand up a safety office immediately. We had the statutory that had passed, the statutory enabling legislation.
Right.
But we were working on the regulatory wraparound. We hadn't finished it, but we had to super accelerate that in order to deal with this new authority to manage that. So that was another really challenging, but incredibly deep learning experience. And then I'll end real quickly with something I continue to be proud of, because it's marked a true passion of mine, has been the equity portfolio that I led at FTA. A top to bottom review and reform of our entire civil rights department including reworking Title VI administrative requirements. We issued formal guidance to implement the environmental justice executive order from the Clinton administration.
Right.
We were the first agency in the USDOT to do that. So that was pretty groundbreaking. And then, reflecting President Obama's groundbreaking work with the Affordable Care Act. I led an initiative called Rides to Wellness to link transit-dependent populations to healthcare in ways that might not have happened before. So it was an amazing time. And I feel that I was able to have some impact in a way that I feel incredibly privileged to have experienced.
I want to drill down a little bit more into the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece of this. And you talk about your service in the administration as one of the big highlights of your career. But another one I know is the fact that you were able to set up a equity platform at LA Metro, which you subsequently brought to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And as a woman of color, to be able to create that equity platform and see it succeed. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, as you might be able to connect these dots, my work at, with the FTA and with the Obama administration in that equity space really had begun to shape for me the need to think about this not as a project, not as a program, but as a paradigm, that equity needs to cut across all lines of business we do, no matter what sector you're in. But of course, I was in transportation. And so I also had the incredible opportunity to work for Phil Washington, who had maybe just the year and a half before I joined, been chosen and appointed to lead LA Metro.
Right.
Phil was an incredible visionary on many, many, many levels, but he had done extraordinary work in career development with traditionally underserved communities in Denver when he was the head of Denver RTD. So he and I were on the same level in terms of the importance of it. And he gave me a very long leash to establish this, the equity platform, which was, as I said before, a way of approaching equity. I'll just mention the four pillars.
Yeah.
To define and measure, to listen and learn, to focus and deliver, and to train and grow. And, that you need to really define and measure equity, and importantly, inequities, in order to make progress to change them.
Right.
That is a significant issue. But we need to be very mindful and committed that defining that space has to be led by the communities that have been most injured and hurt. That this isn't something for us as professionals to come down and say, hey, this is how we're going to fix these inequities. You have to bring the community in as a leader in that role. Focus and deliver really is all about, you can listen to communities, you can define and measure all you want, but if you don't exact change on the ground, you're not going to make progress in fixing the inequities that we see. And train and grow really is about the fact that there is much to learn in this space. There's a lot of research to do in this space. There's a lot of personal learning as professionals to be able to work with community members and to really honor where they've been and to incorporate that into, I would just say, a sort of a collaborative, collective way of making things better. So that's in essence, the equity platform. And I'm so proud that it has been, picked up. I've made lots of presentations about it. And it's something that folks are realizing, I can take this and I can put it in my circumstance. Right. And that was really the goal, that it wouldn't be something designed just for Metro or just for for MTC, but that anyone could take those pillars and think through how it could really impact how they approach, their work.
Therese, what can you tell us about one significant anecdote or accomplishment that came out of the development of this equity platform, either at Metro, FTA, or at MTC?
The one that stands out, because I think, and there's many, but I'll share this because it was something that really helped shape the reason why it was so important, was when I was working at LA Metro, and which is the third largest transit agency in the country, so it's massive. Right. And we were undergoing a significant rehabilitation program for one of the rail line, the Blue Line, which was the oldest rail line in there. And the Blue Line runs through some of the historically underserved communities in South LA through down to Long Beach. Right. And so, there had been, my team, was going to work with, the communities around the stations in terms of, in particular, have access to the station, active transportation and the like. And it was a very eager, well thought of, form, but they thought through it, and good planners came up with a a, proposal of this is what we're going to do for you to help you in terms of lighting and whatnot. And they took it to the community, and the community said, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
This is, how are you going to talk to us about putting in new bike lanes when you haven't repaired our sidewalks for decades? For us, safety is about not just, new lighting, for bicyclists, but the fact that we don't feel safe with the police presence at the Blue Line station. So how are you dealing with that?
Right.
And it really was a moment where we had to sit back and go, you know what? We're going to take our little plan and put it in the trash. And we're going to start over. And we're going to talk to you. And we're going to listen to what you have seen as the neglect that's been wrought upon your community, what our role in that had been, but importantly, we can co-create a future where we can make some improvements. We can't deal with everything that you're facing, but for where we can, we want to start with what you have learned, what you have lived. And it foundationally changed my perspective on how to approach things. And as you might imagine, shaped how the equity platform ultimately was set out.
Yeah, and it really points to your first column there, your first piece of the platform, listen and learn, right?
Yeah. If there's any one of them, that's the most important.
Yeah.
Because the rest all ties to it and comes from it. But yeah, it was a very transformative experience for me.
Therese, we have a question from Midria Clark. How does MTC approach equity internally as an organization? For instance, are there programs to support the agency's employees of color and help them advance in their careers?
Yes, I'm glad that's Train and Grow. That's the platform there. I'm really pleased to say that I set up a new office of equity and inclusion. My new director is working with the staff actually to come up with a name that reflects the commitment that we would all want to see. We have done, so establishing that office was really important. We had done a lot of the work, and because as you might imagine with the equity platform as devised, again, it's supposed to cut across all lines of business. This is important. I wanted to make sure that people understood that everyone has a responsibility to it, not just the office of
Right.
diversity and inclusion. So
Right.
I wanted to kind of make sure that awareness was established first. Then I can establish an office to help us do what we need to do, right? To help lead. So that was a subtle, but I think really important and intentional setting up that I did. That said, one of the things that we've been really keen on is trying to increase diversity among in our recruitments, in our outreach to different colleges and universities. We have internship programs, high school and college, where we focus on communities of color to participate and put the word out and get young men and women to participate there. I have established a leadership program for our agency, which includes a very specific training on equity, inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion that I require all of my managerial folks to participate in.
Right.
It's been incredibly well received, such that now we're going to extend that out to everyone in the agency. So a number of different things moving. Again, looking forward to working with Nalongo Conley, my director, the office, and she also heads up our human resources, department and administration. So she's in a really strong position to influence how we go forward.
Since we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm going to use this opportunity to make a plug for IBTJ's book club. We have a book club that's led by our task force on diversity, social, and racial inclusion. Their next meeting is on July 7th. I'm going to ask Terry Langford to put into the chat the title of the book and the details about that book club. But I'd like to encourage everybody to participate. And Therese, it sounds like we ought to have you as one of the expert presenter speakers with our task force, because we started the task force in 2020, so they're about 2 years old, and we're starting to make some real progress. And it would be wonderful to learn more from a veteran of these challenges like you. So
well, and I would say, I hasten to add, I've had, again, the opportunity to really push and develop and explore. Have I made mistakes? Yeah. Am I an expert? I would say no. I think I'm a more experienced professional. But the people I've worked with, Dr. Manuel Pastor of USC, a number of folks working, at UCLA and UC. I mean, there's so. I guess I would say that if we're going to succeed in this space, sharing is essential, because where you start to fail is assuming you know everything. And it's so important to recognize that with equity, foundationally, it is about a lived experience. And a lived experience often that is something those of us of privilege have not, taken on ourselves or known ourselves.
Right.
And if you don't share and be open to hearing and appreciating and valuing that, we aren't going to make headway here. So there's a different positioning, I think, that we all need to take as best we can, as professionals and as human beings. That I feel that I've seen that in a way that's really gratifying, but it should never be taken for granted. So.
As you talk about the lived experience and the importance of sharing, there's an image that comes to my mind that really resonates with me. And there's a gentleman, a white man, who's sitting in a wheelchair at a Black Lives Matters rally, and he's got a Black Lives Matter sign in his hands, and there's another sign above his head on a pole that says, "I'm sorry I'm late. I had a lot to learn." And, having people come to that understanding comes from listening and learning and sharing, being open to have people share with you.
Yeah, very much so. And look, that's hard. I think that's the other thing that has been held, that has held, particularly in a professional realm, held folks back from really advancing equity as central to our work, is that it is hard to have those conversations because one has to step away very often from your positions of privilege. As a woman of color, as a woman and a person of color, I certainly have had to maneuver in those spaces. And I think it, gave me different valuable perspectives. My own life experience is one where, my parents worked really hard to give us, opportunities they didn't have. that wasn't the case with, my entire family. So I was touched in many ways by challenges. But again, it's a situation where that capacity to listen and learn is the starting point. And that's a very personal commitment that needs to be made. And I think it's one that I at least think we need to allow folks to be able to be in that space and, realize that we need to take time with each other. I say that not saying that we need to drag on progress. We need to make progress. We need to commit to the progress.
Right.
But acknowledge that to do that very often means allowing that human experience to unfold as well. And that happens in different ways. So,
Therese, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to come back to you for some final words of wisdom before we sign off. All right?
Sure, of course.
So everybody, don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of today's program. We're always looking for your comments and want to improve these Café IBTTA. Next week, our guest on Café IBTTA is April Ray, the president and CEO of the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. Our next in-person event is three things: the June 25 conference planning meeting, on June 26th, the annual service project with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Northeastern Ohio, and June 27th through 28th, the Maintenance, Engineering, and Roadway Operations Workshop. Visit the IBTTA website for details on all of our upcoming events. So Therese, what final words of wisdom do you have before we sign off today?
I thought a lot about it, and we spend a lot of time reflecting on our careers and the like, but I'll leave with you what I take away from mine, which is walk humbly on this earth. To do so is to honor the privilege of being here and to do good with the time that we have.
Wow, that's beautiful. Beautiful wisdom and final word. Therese, thank you so much for being our guest today. It's been absolutely fabulous. And we want to get you involved in some of our other activities and events. And to all our viewers, be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, Therese.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated it.